A new beginning. The early morning sun bathed Ethan Miles's modest suburban home in a soft, golden glow, the kind that hinted at the promise of a fresh start. Inside, the house was still, save for the quiet gurgle of the coffee maker in the corner of the kitchen. Ethan folded the last of the laundry on the counter, his movements mechanical, almost meditative. It was his morning ritual, a way to fill the silence that had become his constant companion over the past 2 years. He paused by the mantel, drawn to the silver-framed photograph that had become both a source of comfort and a reminder of all he had lost. Amelia's smile lit up the image, her auburn hair catching the sunlight like it had been kissed by fire. It was their wedding day, one of the happiest moments of his life. "I miss you, Amelia," he whispered, his fingers brushing against the cool glass. The house felt empty without her, but it wasn't entirely silent. In the other room, the faint creak of the floorboards gave away the presence of the triplets. Ethan smiled faintly, a pang of warmth piercing through the ever-present ache in his chest. Caleb, Claire, and Chloe were 8 years old now, full of life, energy, and endless questions. They were his entire world, the reason he found the strength to keep going. Ethan's mind wandered back to the day the triplets had entered his life. It had been 6 months after Amelia's passing, and he was still drowning in his grief. A frantic knock at the door had pulled him from his sorrow. When he opened it, there stood a woman, pale and trembling, holding 3 bundled infants in her arms. "They're yours now," she had said, her voice cracking with desperation. Before Ethan could process what was happening, she thrust the babies into his arms and fled into the night, leaving behind nothing but a hastily scribbled note, "Please take care of them." "I can't." The note offered no clues, no explanations. Just 3 tiny lives that suddenly depended on him. Ethan had been overwhelmed, confused, and terrified. He wasn't even sure if the woman had the right person. But as the babies stirred in his arms, their tiny faces scrunching in hunger and discomfort, something shifted in him. He saw their vulnerability, their innocence, and he knew he couldn't turn his back on them. Raising triplets had been a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and countless diaper changes. Ethan had poured every ounce of himself into them, learning how to be both mother and father. Over time, he grew into his role, and the triplets grew into his heart. Now, as he finished his coffee and set the folded laundry on the sofa, the sound of giggles erupted from the hallway. Seconds later, the triplets came bounding into the kitchen like a tidal wave of energy. Caleb, the oldest by 2 minutes, led the charge, his messy blonde hair sticking up in every direction. Claire followed close behind, her mismatched socks a testament to her independence, while Chloe trailed with a stuffed bunny clutched tightly in her hands. "Dad! Look what I made!" Caleb held up a drawing of a firetruck with stick figure versions of their family waving from the windows. "It's amazing, Bud," Ethan said, ruffling Caleb's hair. "Can we go to the park today, Dad?" Claire asked, her big brown eyes pleading. "Please, Daddy." Chloe chimed in, hugging his leg. Ethan chuckled. All right. Finish your breakfast first, and then we'll go." The kids cheered and rushed to the table, attacking their cereal with gusto. Ethan watched them with a sense of pride and gratitude. They weren't his by blood, but they were his in every way that mattered. As they ate, Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up to see a message from his best friend, Liam. "Liam, hey, man. Got a shift swap tonight. You good to cover?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before typing back. "Ethan, yeah, I've got it. See you later." Working as a firefighter was demanding, but it gave Ethan a sense of purpose. It also provided for the triplets, which was all that mattered to him. He glanced at the clock. There was still time before he had to head to the firehouse, enough to spend the afternoon with the kids. They spent the next few hours at the park, the triplets racing from the swings to the slides while Ethan watched from a bench. He thought about how far they had come as a family. The triplets had filled his life with joy and chaos in equal measure, helping him heal in ways he never thought possible. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Ethan rounded up the kids and brought them home. After dinner and a round of bedtime stories, he tucked each of them into bed, kissing their foreheads and whispering goodnight. Later that night, as Ethan got ready for his shift at the firehouse, he felt a rare sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full. He had his kids, his job, and the memory of Amelia to guide him. But as he pulled on his uniform, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Liam. The message was from an unknown number. "We need to talk about the children. Meet me at the cafe on 5th Street tomorrow at noon." Ethan stared at the screen, his stomach tightening. Who could it be? And what did they mean by the children? A knot of unease settled in his chest as he tried to push the thoughts aside. He couldn't deal with this right now. The triplets were his family, and nothing was going to change that. Or so he thought. Little did Ethan know, the message was just the beginning of a revelation that would unravel the life he had worked so hard to build. Whispers of the past. The early morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft golden beams across the living room floor. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, rereading the mysterious message that had arrived the night before. "We need to talk about the children. Meet me at the cafe on 5th Street tomorrow at noon." The words gnawed at him like a splinter under the skin. Who was this person? And what could they possibly know about his children that he didn't? For years, he had pushed aside the mystery surrounding the triplets' sudden arrival, choosing instead to focus on raising them with all the love and care he could muster. But now, it seemed the past had come knocking, and it wasn't going to leave quietly. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his dark, slightly graying hair. He glanced at the clock, 11 a.m. He had just enough time to drop the kids off at Liam's place before heading to the cafe. The triplets were in the backyard, playing a raucous game of tag. Caleb's laughter echoed through the air as Claire and Chloe chased after him with determined grins. Ethan hated to interrupt their fun, but he needed to keep them safe while he dealt with this unexpected situation. "Kids," he called out, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Time to go to Uncle Liam's." The trio groaned in unison but obediently trotted toward the house. "Do we have to?" Caleb whined. "We were just getting started." "I know, buddy, but I've got an errand to run," Ethan said, ruffling his son's messy blonde hair. "You'll have fun at Liam's, I promise." Claire crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "Is this about grown-up stuff?" "Something like that," Ethan said with a smile. "Now grab your shoes." Within minutes, they were buckled into the car, chattering excitedly about what snacks Liam might have waiting for them. Ethan drove with one eye on the road and the other on the rearview mirror, his mind racing with questions. When they arrived at Liam's place, the kids bounded out of the car and into their godfather's open arms. Liam was a towering figure with a heart as big as his biceps. He gave Ethan a knowing look as they shook hands. "You okay, man?" Liam asked, his voice low. "Not sure yet," Ethan admitted. "Got a weird message last night. I just need a couple of hours to figure it out." Liam nodded. "You know I got your back. The kids will be fine with me." Ethan smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Liam. I owe you one." With that, he climbed back into the car and headed toward the cafe on 5th Street. The cafe was a quaint little spot with mismatched furniture and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Ethan stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. A woman sitting near the window caught his attention. She was dressed in a simple navy blouse and jeans, her long dark hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. Her face was vaguely familiar, but Ethan couldn't place where he had seen her before. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up and met his eyes. A flicker of recognition passed between them. She stood, smoothing her hands down her jeans. "Ethan Miles?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "That's me," he said cautiously. "And you are?" "My name is Elena Harper," she said, extending a hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Ethan shook her hand, his grip firm. "Mind telling me what this is about?" Elena gestured to the table. "Why don't we sit?" Reluctantly, Ethan sat across from her, his muscles tense. "I don't usually meet strangers who send cryptic messages about my kids," he said bluntly. Elena's expression softened. "I understand. This isn't easy for me either. But it's about the triplets." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What about them?" She took a deep breath. "I used to work for a man named Victor Moretti. He's a powerful businessman with a reputation for getting what he wants, no matter the cost." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What does this have to do with my kids?" Elena hesitated, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. "Victor is their biological father." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "That's impossible. Their mother, whoever she was, left them with me years ago. No mention of a father. Just nothing." "I know," Elena said quietly. "Victor didn't know about them either. But now he does, and he wants them back." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "Over my dead body." Elena leaned forward, her voice urgent. "I'm on your side, Ethan. That's why I'm here. Victor sent me to track you down, but I couldn't go through with it. Those kids don't belong in his world. They deserve better." Ethan's mind raced. He had built a life around those children, pouring his heart and soul into raising them. The thought of losing them was unbearable. "What does he want with them?" Ethan demanded. Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "Victor sees them as his heirs. His legacy. He'll use his wealth and influence to fight for custody if he has to." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Let him try. I'll fight harder." A flicker of admiration crossed Elena's face. "You're a good man, Ethan. That's why I came to warn you. But you need to be careful. Victor doesn't play fair." Ethan's gaze was steely. "Neither do I when it comes to my kids." Elena nodded. "I'll help you in any way I can. But you need to be ready for what's coming." As they stood to leave, Ethan felt a storm brewing on the horizon. His peaceful life was about to be upended, but he wouldn't back down. The triplets were his family, and no one, not even a powerful businessman, was going to take them away from him. "Thank you, Elena," he said as they walked toward the door. "I'll be in touch." She gave him a small, determined smile. "Stay strong, Ethan." As he drove back to Liam's house, Ethan's mind was already strategizing. He had faced countless challenges as a firefighter, but this was different. This was personal. And he would protect his family at all costs. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would test the limits of his strength, courage, and love for the triplets who had become his entire world. The storm gathers. The triplets' laughter echoed through Liam's backyard as Ethan pulled into the driveway. The sight of them playing tug-of-war with a rope, Chloe cheering on her siblings, brought a brief smile to his face. But the weight of the conversation with Elena still pressed heavily on his shoulders. Victor Moretti. The name alone carried a sinister weight. A powerful businessman known for his ruthless tactics and influence. What would a man like that want with 3 innocent children? Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. They were his kids, maybe not by blood, but by every meaningful bond that mattered. He had stayed up countless nights nursing them through fevers, tying their shoes when they learned to walk, and teaching them to ride bikes. He had earned the right to be their father through love and sacrifice. And no one was going to take that away from him. Not without a fight. As Ethan stepped out of the car, Liam jogged over, his expression curious. "You good, man?" Liam asked, handing Ethan a bottle of water. "Not really," Ethan admitted, twisting off the cap and taking a long sip. Liam frowned. "What's going on?" Ethan glanced at the kids, who were still absorbed in their game. He lowered his voice. "It's about the triplets. Some woman named Elena Harper showed up, claiming their biological father is this big-shot businessman, Victor Moretti. And now he wants them back." Liam let out a low whistle. "That's heavy. What are you gonna do?" "Whatever it takes to keep them with me," Ethan said firmly. "But I need help. I have to figure out who this guy really is and what I'm up against." Liam nodded without hesitation. "I'm in. Whatever you need, I've got your back." "Thanks, man," Ethan said, grateful for his friend's unwavering support. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them. "You think this Moretti guy is gonna play fair?" Liam asked. Ethan shook his head. "No chance. But neither am I." Later that night, after tucking the triplets into bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. The glow from the screen illuminated his determined expression as he typed Victor Moretti's name into the search bar. The results were overwhelming. News articles, financial reports, and glossy magazine features painted a picture of a man who was both admired and feared. Moretti was a billionaire real estate mogul with a sprawling empire that extended beyond legitimate business ventures. Whispers of corruption, backdoor deals, and ruthless takeovers followed him like a shadow. Ethan's jaw clenched as he read further. This was the man who thought he could waltz into their lives and claim the triplets as his own? Over his dead body. His phone buzzed on the table, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Elena. "Elena, we need to meet again. There's more you need to know." Ethan's pulse quickened. What could be worse than what she had already told him? "Ethan, where and when?" Her response was immediate. "Elena, Pier 17. Midnight." Ethan frowned. The pier was an isolated, sketchy place at that hour. But if Elena had more information, he needed to hear it. Grabbing his jacket, Ethan left a note for Liam, who had agreed to crash on the couch for the night, just in case the kids woke up. The air at Pier 17 was thick with the scent of saltwater and rust. The distant hum of cargo ships echoed through the night. Ethan parked his truck and made his way toward the edge of the dock, where Elena stood silhouetted against the moonlit water. "You sure know how to pick a meeting spot," Ethan said as he approached. Elena turned, her expression grim. "I couldn't risk being seen. Victor has eyes everywhere." Ethan crossed his arms. "So what's this about?" "I did some digging," Elena said, her voice low. "Victor didn't just find out about the triplets by chance. Someone tipped him off." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Who?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But there's more. Victor's lawyers are already drafting custody papers. He's planning to take you to court." Ethan's heart pounded. "Let him try. I've got the truth on my side." Elena's gaze was filled with concern. "Ethan, the truth doesn't always matter when you're up against someone like Victor. He can buy judges, manipulate evidence, and bury you in legal fees until you have no choice but to give up." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. "I'm not giving up. Ever." Elena nodded, admiration flickering in her eyes. "I believe you. That's why I'm here. I want to help." "Why?" Ethan asked, his voice wary. "What's in it for you?" Elena's expression softened. "Because I've seen what Victor's world does to people. I don't want that for those kids. They deserve better." Ethan studied her for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "All right. What's the plan?" We need leverage, Elena said. Something that can keep Victor at bay. I know he has skeletons in his closet. If we can find them, we might have a chance. Ethan's mind raced. This was dangerous territory, but he didn't see any other option. Where do we start? I have a few contacts who might be able to help, Elena said. But we'll need to move fast. Victor doesn't waste time. Ethan's jaw tightened. Neither do I. As they stood there, the waves lapping against the dock, Ethan felt the weight of the battle ahead. He was stepping into uncharted waters, but he wasn't alone. And for the triplets, he would face whatever storm came his way. Back home, Ethan checked on the kids, their peaceful faces illuminated by the soft glow of their nightlights. He knelt by Caleb's bed, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I'll protect you," he whispered. "No matter what." As he stood, resolve hardened in his chest. The fight for his family had only just begun. And Ethan Miles was ready for war. Shadows of deception. The following days were a blur of preparation and tension. Ethan knew the storm was coming, and every instinct as both a firefighter and a father told him to be ready. The triplets, blissfully unaware, went about their days filled with laughter, school projects, and soccer practice. Ethan marveled at their resilience, but beneath his smile, a fire of determination burned. Victor Moretti wasn't just a threat, he was a force with money, influence, and a reputation for bending the world to his will. But Ethan had something Moretti didn't, unbreakable love for those kids. That love had turned him into a man who would fight tooth and nail to protect them. One evening, as the triplets played video games in the living room, Ethan sat in the kitchen with Liam and Elena. A stack of files lay spread across the table, legal documents, financial records, and news clippings that Elena had managed to dig up. "This guy's practically untouchable," Liam said, shaking his head as he flipped through a file. "Every dirty deal he's made has been buried or whitewashed." Elena leaned forward, her voice hushed but intense. "Not quite every deal. There's a development project Victor oversaw 5 years ago in Riverton. It went under the radar, but I found records of environmental violations and fraudulent permits." Ethan's brow furrowed. "That's not enough to stop him, though, is it?" "No," Elena admitted. "But it's a start. If we can find more dirt, we might be able to leverage it to keep him at bay." Ethan rubbed his temples. "And what if that's not enough? What if he takes this to court?" Liam's expression darkened. "Then we fight like hell." Elena's gaze was steady. "I'll testify if it comes to that. I was on the inside for years. I know things that could ruin him." Ethan's chest tightened with gratitude. "Why are you risking this for us, Elena?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I know what it's like to grow up in Victor's world. My father worked for him, and it destroyed our family. I couldn't stand by and let him do the same to yours." Ethan reached across the table, squeezing her hand briefly. "Thank you." She nodded, her resolve unwavering. "We'll get through this. Together." The next morning, Ethan was loading the kids' lunchboxes when the doorbell rang. His heart skipped a beat. Visitors had become rare ever since Elena warned him about Victor's surveillance. "Stay here," he told the triplets, who were sitting at the breakfast table. Opening the door, Ethan found himself face to face with a sharply dressed man in a tailored suit. His slicked back hair and cold blue eyes radiated arrogance. Two men in dark suits flanked him, their postures rigid. "Mr. Miles," the man said with a thin smile. "My name is James Sinclair. I represent Victor Moretti." Ethan's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" Sinclair's smile didn't waver. "I'm here to extend an offer on behalf of Mr. Moretti. He wishes to resolve this matter amicably." "There's nothing to resolve," Ethan said, his voice firm. "Those kids are mine." Sinclair's smile faltered for a moment. Mr. Moretti believes otherwise. However, he's willing to be generous. A financial settlement in exchange for shared custody. Ethan's blood boiled. Not a chance. Sinclair's eyes hardened. I urge you to reconsider. Mr. Moretti doesn't take kindly to defiance. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You can tell your boss that I don't take kindly to threats. Now get off my property. Sinclair's expression turned icy. Very well. You've made your position clear. But know this, Victor Moretti always gets what he wants. Ethan stood his ground as Sinclair and his goons walked back to their sleek black car. As they drove away, Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a war. That night, after the triplets were asleep, Ethan sat on the back porch with Liam and Elena. The cool night air carried the scent of freshly cut grass. They sent a lawyer today, Ethan said grimly, recounting the encounter. Liam's jaw tightened. They're turning up the heat. Elena's expression was fierce. We need to hit back. I have a contact who might be able to dig up more on Victor's Riverton project. But it's risky. Ethan met her gaze. Do it. I'll handle the risk. Liam nodded. And I'll keep an eye on the kids. No way those goons are getting near them. Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude for his friends. They were standing by him when it would have been easier to walk away. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Liam clapped him on the back. We're in this together, brother. Elena's eyes gleamed with determination. Victor Moretti has no idea who he's messing with. Ethan's gaze hardened. He's about to find out. The next few days were a whirlwind of covert meetings and strategic planning. Elena's contact came through, uncovering a trove of documents that painted a damning picture of Victor's dealings in Riverton. Fraud, bribery, and environmental violations were just the tip of the iceberg. We've got him, Elena said triumphantly as she spread the documents across the table. This is enough to take him down. Ethan's lips curved into a grim smile. Let's see how he likes being on the defensive for once. As they prepared to launch their offensive, Ethan knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Victor Moretti had power and influence, but Ethan had something stronger: love, loyalty, and a determination that couldn't be bought or broken. And that made all the difference. The fight for family. The early morning sun cast a golden glow across the neighborhood as Ethan stood by the kitchen window, watching the triplets chase each other around the backyard. Their laughter was a melody that soothed his nerves, but the storm brewing inside him was impossible to ignore. Victor Moretti had escalated the situation. The man's lawyer, James Sinclair, had filed an official custody suit. The court summons arrived at Ethan's doorstep like a knife to the gut, bearing the full weight of Moretti's intentions, to take the children away. Ethan gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. The thought of losing Caleb, Lily, and Chloe was unthinkable. He had raised them, poured his heart and soul into their upbringing, and loved them as fiercely as any father could. They're mine, he muttered under his breath. No one's taking them from me. The creak of the back door brought him back to the present. Liam walked in, his expression grim. You ready for this? Ethan nodded, though a part of him wondered if anyone could ever truly be ready to face a man like Victor Moretti. At the courthouse, the tension was palpable. The grand marble halls echoed with the footsteps of attorneys, clients, and spectators. Ethan stood tall, his jaw set, with Liam by his side. Elena had promised to meet them there, bringing with her the evidence they needed to turn the tide. James Sinclair approached, his smug expression intact. Mr. Miles, he greeted smoothly. I trust you've had time to reconsider our offer. Ethan's gaze was steely. The answer's still no. Sinclair's smile didn't reach his eyes. A pity. You'll find that defiance comes at a steep price. We'll see about that, Liam muttered under his breath. Ethan resisted the urge to punch the man right there in the courthouse. He couldn't afford to lose his temper, not when so much was at stake. The hearing room was cold and sterile, the walls lined with shelves of legal books. The judge, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, presided over the proceedings. Victor Moretti sat across the room, his presence commanding and oppressive. Dressed in a tailored suit, he exuded an air of power and entitlement. Ethan's stomach churned at the sight of him. The triplets' lives were not commodities to be bought or claimed. They were his family, bound by love and shared memories. As the proceedings began, Sinclair presented Moretti's case with polished eloquence, painting a picture of a benevolent father seeking to reunite with his long-lost children. Ethan's fists clenched under the table. Lies. All of it. When it was his turn to speak, Ethan stood, his voice steady despite the nerves twisting in his gut. "I'm not a lawyer," he began, "but I know what it means to be a father. I've been there for those kids every step of the way, through scraped knees, sleepless nights, and every milestone in between. I didn't need blood ties to love them, and I won't let anyone take them from me now." His words hung in the air, raw and powerful. The judge's expression softened slightly, but Sinclair was quick to pounce. "Mr. Miles, with all due respect, love doesn't negate biology. These children have a right to know their biological father." Before Ethan could respond, the door to the courtroom opened, and Elena strode in, a folder clutched tightly in her hand. She nodded subtly at Ethan as she took her seat. "Your Honor," Elena said, rising from her seat, "I have evidence that sheds light on Mr. Moretti's character and fitness as a parent." The judge arched an eyebrow. "Proceed." Elena handed the folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. "These documents detail Mr. Moretti's involvement in fraudulent business dealings, environmental violations, and multiple instances of bribery. Additionally, I have sworn testimony from former employees who witnessed his unethical behavior firsthand." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Moretti's composed facade cracked for a brief moment, his jaw tightening. "This is absurd," Sinclair interjected. "These allegations are baseless." "The evidence speaks for itself," Elena shot back. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Moretti, these allegations are serious. I will need time to review this evidence thoroughly before making a decision." Ethan's heart raced. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step in the right direction. Outside the courthouse, Ethan exhaled a shaky breath. Liam clapped him on the back. "You did good, man." Elena crossed her arms, a fierce glint in her eyes. "This isn't over, but we've got him on the defensive now." Ethan nodded, gratitude swelling in his chest. "I couldn't have done this without you too." Elena smiled faintly. "We're not done yet. But we will win this." As they stood there, the weight of the battle lifted slightly from Ethan's shoulders. He wasn't alone in this fight, and for the first time in weeks, hope bloomed in his chest. That evening, back home, Ethan sat on the porch as the triplets played in the yard. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Caleb ran up to him, breathless. "Dad, did you see that kick?" "I nailed it." Ethan ruffled his hair. "I saw, buddy. You're getting better every day." Lily and Chloe joined them, their faces flushed with joy. "We love you, Dad," Lily said softly. Ethan's throat tightened. "I love you too. More than anything." As they sat together, the world felt right, despite the challenges that lay ahead. Ethan knew the fight wasn't over, but he had something Victor Moretti could never understand, an unbreakable bond with his children. And that bond would see them through anything but a family unbroken. The weeks that followed the initial hearing were tense and grueling. Ethan poured every ounce of his energy into preparing for the next court date, knowing that the battle for the triplets was far from over. Victor Moretti was a man used to winning, and Ethan had no illusions about the lengths he would go to secure victory. But Ethan wasn't fighting alone. Liam, ever loyal, kept a watchful eye on the family, while Elena worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. The triplets, blissfully unaware of the legal storm swirling around them, continued to fill the house with laughter and warmth. One evening, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table reviewing court documents, Chloe wandered in, her brow furrowed in concern. "Dad?" she asked softly. He looked up, forcing a smile. "What's up, sweetheart? Are we in trouble?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He set the papers aside and pulled her onto his lap. "Why do you ask that? You've been really serious lately. And Aunt Elena is always talking about that man in the suit." Ethan took a steadying breath. "We're not in trouble, Chloe. But there's a man who thinks he has a right to be part of your lives. I'm just making sure that doesn't happen." Her eyes, wide and innocent, searched his face. "We don't want anyone but you, Dad." His throat tightened. "I know, sweetheart. And I'm going to make sure that never changes." The final court date arrived on a gray, overcast morning. Ethan dressed carefully, his hands steady despite the nerves coiled in his stomach. The triplets were at Liam's house, shielded from the tension of the day. Elena met him at the courthouse steps, her expression resolute. "We've got everything we need to take Moretti down," she assured him. Ethan nodded. "Let's finish this." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Victor Moretti sat at the defense table, his expression cold and calculating. Sinclair stood beside him, his polished demeanor unshaken. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The proceedings began with testimony from both sides. Sinclair painted Moretti as a reformed businessman eager to reconnect with his biological children. Ethan gritted his teeth, knowing it was all smoke and mirrors. Then it was Elena's turn. She took the stand with unwavering confidence, detailing Moretti's corrupt dealings and unethical behavior. Her testimony was backed by irrefutable evidence, including financial records and witness statements. The judge's expression grew increasingly grave as the evidence piled up. When Sinclair attempted to discredit Elena, she remained composed, countering each accusation with facts. Finally, it was Ethan's turn to speak. He stood before the judge, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Your Honor," he began, "I didn't become a father the day those kids were born. I became their father through every moment we've shared, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every hug when they were scared. I love them, and they love me. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does." The judge's gaze softened as she listened. "I'm not a perfect man," Ethan continued, "but I've done everything in my power to give those kids a safe, happy life. And I'll keep fighting for them, no matter what." When he finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward, her voice firm but compassionate. "This case has been difficult," she said. "But the evidence presented today has made one thing clear: Mr. Moretti's intentions are not in the best interest of these children. Custody will remain with Mr. Miles." Relief washed over Ethan, so powerful that his knees nearly buckled. Elena squeezed his arm, her smile triumphant. Victor Moretti's face was a mask of rage, but he said nothing as the judge dismissed the case. Sinclair gathered his papers with a grim expression, knowing they had been defeated. Outside the courthouse, Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Liam was waiting with the triplets, who ran toward Ethan with joyful shouts. "You did it, Dad!" Caleb cheered. "We knew you'd win," Lily added. Chloe hugged him tightly. "We love you, Dad." Ethan's eyes stung with tears as he held them close. I love you too. Always. Elena and Liam stood nearby, their expressions filled with pride. You're officially a legend, Liam said with a grin. Elena nodded. You fought for what mattered most. And you won. Ethan smiled, his heart full. We won. All of us. That evening, the house was filled with celebration. Pizza boxes littered the kitchen counter, and the triplets danced around the living room to their favorite songs. Ethan watched them, his heart light for the first time in weeks. The battle had been hard, but it was worth it. His family was safe, and their bond was stronger than ever. As the night wound down, Chloe climbed onto his lap, her eyes heavy with sleep. Dad? Yeah, sweetheart? Are we going to be okay now? He kissed the top of her head. Yeah, Chloe. We're going to be more than okay. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan believed it. He had fought for his family and won. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because love was stronger than blood, stronger than fear, and stronger than any storm. And that love would carry them forward, unbroken, unshakable, and forever.